Senator Archibald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first and foremost, I commend Senator Raptakis for his zealous advocacy of trying to strengthen the criminal laws where he feels that there is a need to protect public safety. So that premise is sound. Where I have serious concerns about this bill, and I know it's a piece in work, and I appreciate you, Senator, qualifying that from the outset of your remarks, but where I concur with Mr. Brown, Mr. DeLauro, and clearly the comments that were made, protection element, has to do with the statutory mandate of minimum sentencing. Anytime that you take away the ability of judges to have discretion in sentencing, you tend to pigeonhole yourself in an area where, as was aptly said by Mr. DeLauro in his piece from the Public Defender's Office, you have prosecutors making decisions rather than the court. I prosecute for 3 municipalities. I've been doing it for some time. I don't think the discretion should rest with a municipal prosecutor or a representative of the Attorney General's office. I think that judges are in the best position to make a determination as to what sentence best fits a unique set of facts based upon a crime. I'm adamant about that. I won't deviate from that. I think we should have learned our lessons with the federal minimum sentencing that now is under major revision because it doesn't work. So I start from that premise. Now, I understand what you're trying to do, Senator Raptakis, and perhaps with some drafts we can really flesh it out. But when you hear comments like harsh and unnecessarily broad, I mean, I deal with the prosecution of reckless driving on a weekly basis in court, and I've handled countless cases in that respect. And I understand the spirit of trying to protect people, but when we take a broad class of people who, for all intents and purposes, just to use the example of protesters, may not have that scienta or mens rea, that criminal mind, and yet we couch them into a category which is intentionally, knowing, or recklessly. Recklessly, that's the part that scares me. It's broad. It's overly broad in its impact. You could take somebody who is defined as reckless simply because they walked across the roadway, and you could have a local police officer as the complainant. Says right in it on line 24, page 2, that a local police officer could be the complainant, and you have them bring forth a case where someone's charged with a felony with a mandatory minimum sentence. I mean, think about that. Just think about that for a minute. Felony, mandatory minimum felony. So, I mean, I have grave concerns about trying to push a felony on a first offense. I was heartened to hear you say the second offense. If it's a second offense and somebody clearly has been, we do that with reckless driving now, right? Mr. DeLauro, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure reckless driving for a second conviction is a felony. Don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure it is off the top of my head. Anyways, it's late. I want to share my comments. The way the bill is written and the direction it's taking the penalties in is something that I think is draconian. I understand what you're trying to do. I really do. And I mean my comments sincerely, Lou. I just think that the impact is overly broad and beyond what we really want to do when it comes to preserving judicial discretion. I mean, look at the amendment to the DUI bill that was passed last year and the hardship license. Now you see judges even trying to get together on the discretion of how to implement a bill that is pretty specific but needs a little work, and we'll make some changes to it. But that illustrates the point that judicial discretion works. It works. Conversations happen. It works. This erodes judicial discretion. And for that reason, I think.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments? Yeah. Senator Metz.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Senator Archibald said, I agree with the, because we did, we finally dealt with the mandatory sentencing when we had when the market crashed in 2008 and we had to face some serious budget considerations. And one of the things we looked at, several states and Rhode Island as it related to the mandatory sentencing, and I think we all agreed at that time that it was best to give the judges the discretion because the prison budgets were increasing astronomically. And so we were concerned with that. And now I'm reading a book, The New Jim Crow, looking at the sentencing. And maybe 1970, we had like 250,000 people incarcerated in the country. And now it's over 2.4 million, if I remember the figures correctly. So I'll just say this. At age 17, I was a lot different than when I was at age 27. And young people do make mistakes. And we certainly wouldn't want it. That's one of the things I do now in the prison ministry. People serve their time and they're trying to get a job for something they did in their youth after 18, especially with 18 years old. So we do have to address this problem. What's the best way to do it? I'm not sure. But people do grow up and they do change, but you don't want them saddled with a felony conviction for something that they did when they were young. So I echo Senator Archibald's concerns.
Committee.
Well, witnesses come start testifying. I just want to address what Senator Archibald said.
Go ahead, Senator Raptakis.
That I guess one of the statements was about a police officer making that determination on a side street. We're not talking about a local street in any of our cities and towns. We're talking about our interstate highways where we endanger the public when these protesters take place. We endanger our law enforcement officials that maybe try to prevent unannounced protesting that come down the embankment on Route 95. And if one of these protesters slips and falls, knocks over the state trooper into oncoming traffic, and that state trooper is killed, what is the penalty? You know, some protesters want to ignore the fact that with rights like freedom of speech come responsibilities. So we have to really be responsible for our action. And our state highways are probably the lifeline of our state, especially saving lives, transporting people to the hospital. And if any of these individuals lose their life, who's responsible? You have to be responsible. And I have no problem working with my colleagues, but we have to really look at the actions of those that decide just to protest. And what about the repeat offenders? What happens if the first offense is a misdemeanor and that individual decides to go block that highway a second or third time? What, are we just going to sit back and allow this to take place over and over and over? So I think this is a very serious issue. We've seen it in our state happen. We've seen it in our neighborhood states occur. And it really has to be addressed. And I believe that my colleagues here will work together to find some type of resolution, a meaningful resolution, and to protect the citizens of this state.
Is there a need for a response, Senator?
There is. It's late, but I need to respond if I may. In your scenario, Senator, I appreciate the catastrophic effect of a trooper being, or a police officer being harmed in the conduct of their duty. No one would dispute that somebody who recklessly engages in activity that results in such circumstances should be punished and punished accordingly. But I think when you go to rework this, I think you need to look at page 2. Look right at the language under line 18 under your statute. Stands, sits, kneels, otherwise loiters. How do you define otherwise loiters? Otherwise loiters on any federal highway in such or state highway under such circumstances that said conduct could reasonably be construed as interfering. Who defines reasonably construed as interfering? Think about how broad that is. And then look at this next section. Or, and I'm just skipping ahead in that section 2, sits, kneels, otherwise loiters, causing the interruption, obstruction, distraction, delay of any motorist operating. You know, I tend to be somewhat conservative in certain parts of my life, but in other areas I think you really need to jump over and play the devil's advocate. And here what my concern is, Senator, is I'm with you on protecting the public and the public safety. I'm with you. Have me hook, line, and sinker. My concern is the overly broad nature of this language. It opens the door to a subjective interpretation by a police officer as a complainant, and I was a police officer. I'm biased. I prosecute for police officers. So, I respect their job greatly. Don't take me as some, open the door left-wing guy here, because I'm not, for lack of a better way to put it. But I think you really need to train the language, tie it down so that you protect those who don't have that mens rea, that scienta, to want to harm, to elevate themselves to a reckless standard, or beyond that willful standard, that gross negligence. That's what I'm getting at. It's a good starting point. It's a good starting point for conversation. I love you, Lou. It's all good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.